And Moshe said, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh your Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I'm commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children. And shall speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Shabbat shalom to everyone worshiping with us at home. The name of the message today is, I am Yahweh who brought you out. All right? Now, in 1 week, we'll be observing Pesach, Passover, and Chag Matzah, the Festival of Unleavened Bread, and I'm really looking forward to it. I want to ask the question today, what was the purpose of Passover and unleavened bread? And so I want to turn to the Scripture and see what it's got to say. So if you'll turn with me to Exodus chapter 12, Shemot chapter 12, and we are going to be on page 68 in the 98 ISR. We'll start reading in verse 1. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe and to Aharon in the land of Mitzrayim, that would be Egypt, saying, This month is the beginning of months for you. It is the first month of the year for you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, On the 10th day of this month, each one of them is to take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the beings. According to each man's need, you make your count for the lamb. Let the lamb be a perfect one, a year-old male. Take it from the sheep and from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then all the assembly of the congregation of Yisrael shall kill it between the evenings. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the house where they eat it. And they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire, with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water, but roasted in fire, its head with its legs and its inward parts. And do not leave of it until morning, and what remains of it until morning you are to burn with fire, and this is how you eat it. Your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Passover of Yahweh. And I shall pass through the land of Mitzrayim on that night, and shall smite all the firstborn of the land of Mitzrayim, both man and beast, and on, now look at this, and on all the mighty ones of Mitzrayim I shall execute judgment. I am Yahweh. Okay, that's the first part, all right? Continue on to verse 13. And the blood shall be for a sin sacrifice to atone for your sins. And it points to Yahshua, who you don't know about yet, but you will hundreds of years from now, when my servant Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 5 says, Yours doesn't. Mine doesn't say that either. Mine doesn't say that. Well, look. If it doesn't even say anything about a sin sacrifice, and mine don't either. If yours doesn't say that, and mine doesn't, well, from where does this idea come? Maybe it's in the following verses. Maybe. All right, so let's keep going. Verse 13, and the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I shall pass over you, and let the plague not come on you to destroy you when I smite the land of Mitzrayim. So, why is Yahweh smiting the land of Mitzrayim? Well, read verse 12 again. And I shall pass through the land of Mitzrayim on that night, and shall smite all the firstborn of the land of Mitzrayim, both man and beast, and on all the mighty ones of Mitzrayim I shall execute judgment. I am Yahweh. All right? So let's keep going in verse 14. And this day shall become to you a remembrance or a memorial, and you shall observe it as a festival to Yahweh throughout your generations. You see that? Observe it as a festival and everlasting law. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Indeed, on the first day you cause leaven to cease from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that being shall be cut off from Yisrael. And on the first day is a set-apart gathering, and on the 7th day you have a set-apart gathering. No work at all is done on them, only that which is eaten by every being, that alone is prepared by you. And you shall guard the festival of unleavened bread, for on this same day, look at this, I brought your divisions out of the land of Mitzrayim. That's the second part right there. All right? You see, Yahweh wants us to be very impressed with the fact that He delivered us, the lowest of the low in Mitzrayim, the slaves, took us by the hand and led us out of the hands of the earth's greatest superpower at that time, the land of Mitzrayim. You know, Mitzrayim was to them like the United States is now, or China, or the former Soviet Union, the Russians now. It was something to that the lowly of the low were not going to be easily able to stand up and just come out against. All right, but Yahweh took Yisrael and He led them out by a strong hand, and He wants us to be very impressed with that. Amen? All right? Well, that's easy enough to say. Let's just keep reading and see. And you shall guard this day throughout your generations, an everlasting law. There it is again. On the first month, on the 14th day of the month in the evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month in the evening. For 7 days, no leaven is to be found in your houses. For if anyone eats what is leavened, that same being shall be cut off from the congregation of Yisrael, whether sojourner or native in the land. Do not eat that which is leavened. In all your dwellings you are to eat unleavened bread. And Moses, called for all the elders of Yisrael and said to them, Go out and take lambs for yourselves according to your clans, and slaughter the Passover lamb. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop, and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the 2 doorposts with the blood that is in the basin. And you, none of you, shall go out of the door of his house until morning. And Yahweh shall pass on to smite the Mitzrites, the Egyptians, and shall see the blood on the lintel and on the 2 doorposts. And Yahweh shall pass over the door, and not allow the destroyer to come into your houses to smite you. And you shall guard this word as a law for you and your sons forever. And it shall be when you come into the land which Yahweh gives you, as He promised, that you shall guard this service. And it shall be when your children say to you, What does this service mean to you? Then you, what are those next 2 words? Shall say, It is the Passover slaughtering of Yahweh, who passed over the houses of the children of Yisrael in Mitzrayim, when He smote the Mitzrites and delivered our households. And the people bowed their heads and did obeisance. And the children of Yisrael went away and did so as Yahweh had commanded Moshe and Aharon, so they did. So that's what Passover's about. That's what Passover's about. And if we teach our children something different, because it said when your children ask you, what's this about? If we teach them something different, we are teaching them something which is against what the Word of Yahweh, which we just read, it's against the Word of Yahweh and what He told us that it was all about, and what He told us to teach them. Amen? Right? Now, I want to look at how often Yahweh reminds Yisrael about this event in His Word, and we're not going to look at every instance. There's just so many, and we. But we should see that this was an awe-inspiring event that He wants remembered as such. Right? And look at what He says after Yisrael has said, all that Yahweh has commanded, we shall do. All right? Exodus chapter 20. Remember, Yahweh met them at the mountain, and they said, all that Yahweh says, we shall do. Exodus 20, verse 1. And this is where he begins giving the terms of the covenant. Verse 1. And Elohim spoke all these words, saying, I am Yahweh, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of slavery. That's the first thing he says. That's the first. Do you think that he's saying this because they have already forgotten what just happened within the last 2 months after being slaves in Mitzrayim for 400 years? You think that's why he's saying that? Because they forgot that already? And all the plagues and the death of the firstborn and being terrified of the Mitzrites at the Sea of Reeds and the sea opening up and the column of cloud and the column of fire and passing through the sea as it swallowed up all of the Mitzrites and delivered Yisrael. No, he wasn't reminding them of that. He was reminding them who he was and is. That's why he brought that up, all right? He's affirming that he is the all-inspiring Elohim who performed that event, and he wants you to be very impressed with all that has happened to Israel. All right, verse 3. You have no other mighty ones against my face. All right? This is the first command here. Now, we were talking about this in Torah study. It says in most translations, have no other mighty ones before me. All right? And it says here in the ISR, it says against my face. Well, guess what? It really does say before or against my face in the Hebrew. All right? And I tend to think that this is a very, it is, I think we used the word earlier, provocative. When you, it's like shoving those idols, those other deities in his face. It's like slapping him in the face. And he's not talking about in succession other mighty ones. He's talking about, I don't want to see those. I do not want to see those. Right? You have no other mighty ones against my face. You do not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of that which is in the heavens above, or which is in the earth beneath, or which is in the waters underneath the earth. You do not bow down to them, nor serve them, for I, Yahweh, your Elohim, am a jealous El, visiting the crookedness of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing kindness to thousands, to those who love me and guard my commands. You do not bring the name of Yahweh your Elohim to naught, for Yahweh does not leave the one unpunished who brings his name to naught. All right, then, from chapter 20 through 23, Moshe gives the people the commands of Yahweh. And then in chapter 24, as one verse, we're going to move along here. Chapter 24, we're going to look in verse 3. It says, And Moshe came and related to the people all the words of Yahweh and all the right rulings, and all the people answered with one voice and said, All the words which Yahweh has spoken we shall do. Okay, then Yahweh goes up on the mountain to speak with Yahweh, and Moshe goes up on the mountain to speak with Yahweh, and we see in chapter 32, Yisrael is already fallen into transgression. All right, 32 verse 1. Page 91. And when the people saw that Moshe was so long in coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aharon and said to him, Arise, make us mighty ones who go before us. For this Moshe, the man who brought us up out of the land of Mitzrayim, we do not know what has become of him. And Aharon said to them, Take off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me. And all the people took off the golden earrings which were in their ears and brought them to Aharon. And he took this from their hand, and he formed it with an engraving tool and made a molded calf and said, This is your mighty one, O Yisrael. And look what it says next, that brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim. And Aharon saw and built an altar before it. And Aharon called out and said, Tomorrow is a festival to Yahweh. And they rose early on the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings to the idol. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. All right. This is the 3 strikes and you're out rule right here. All right. Look what we got here. They made a molded image of something on the earth. All right. And then they said it was the mighty one that brought them out of Mitzrayim, which Yahweh always wants ascribed to him. And then, to add insult to injury, they transgressed the 3rd command and gave the esteem of the name of Yahweh to another mighty one. Verse 7. And Yahweh said to Moshe, go, get down, for the people whom you brought out of the land of Mitzrayim have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made themselves a molded calf and have bowed themselves to it and slaughtered to it and said, this is your mighty one, O Yisrael, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim. Do you see Yahweh is telling him what they've done and expressing his displeasure with this? This is what they're doing down there. This made Yahweh very angry because they're already giving credit to their deliverance to an idol. And not the real Elohim who performed the deliverance. All right? Now, as far as I can tell, this is probably the first example of syncretism in the Scripture. It might be some that's not coming to mind, but this one certainly is. Does everybody know what syncretism is? All right? If you don't know what syncretism is when you take religious beliefs and practices from one religion and you take religious beliefs from another and you blend them together. Okay? And that's what's happening right here. And this is something that Yahweh tells Israel not to do, because he says, don't worship me in the way of the heathens, because everything that they do, I hate. All right? And when you make an image, when you make a molded image and call it Yahweh, that's exactly an example of syncretism. All right, but the very first command that Yahweh gave after they said all that Yahweh has said we shall do, the very first one, they transgressed. Bam. Very first one. Go back to Exodus 20. Verse 3. You have no other mighty ones against my face. You do not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of that which is in the heavens above, or which is in the earth beneath, or which is in the waters under the earth. You do not bow down to them nor serve them. So, to make matters worse, they transgressed the 3rd command that he gave them. And you do not bring the name of Yahweh, your Elohim, to naught, for Yahweh does not leave the one unpunished who brings his name to naught. By calling this hideous example of Mitzrayim worship, which is what it was, Mitzrayim worship Yahweh, after Yahweh had what? Smitten all the mighty ones. And he did that while bringing the children of Israel out of the house of Mitzrayim and out of the house of bondage. Right? This was not a well thought out plan, brothers and sisters. How quickly man often tries to make the ways and the abominations of the world acceptable in the sight of Yahweh. Look at Genesis chapter 1. It's going to be on page 2. Verse 26. It says, and Elohim said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Now skip down to verse 27. And Elohim created the man in his image. In the image of Elohim he created him, male and female he created them. But much of man's history after that has been in trying to create Elohim in his image. You know? And it goes on today, and the golden calf is just another example. It's just another example. So Yahweh sure doesn't want us giving the credit that belongs to him to another. Amen? Well, let's look at some more. The appointed times are to remind us of bondage and deliverance from Mitzrayim. Now, people say all the appointed times point to something. Let's see what it seems like they're really pointing to. Exodus 12. I think we already looked at one of these. Let's see. Or two or three of them. Exodus 12:17. And you shall guard the festival of unleavened bread, for on that same day I brought your divisions out of the land of Mitzrayim. And you shall guard this day throughout your generations, an everlasting law. Verse 42. It is a night to be observed unto Yahweh for bringing them out of the land of Mitzrayim. This night is unto Yahweh to be observed by all the children of Israel throughout their generations. We see a pattern here. Verse 50. And all the children of Israel did as Yahweh commanded Moshe and Aharon, so they did, and it came to be on that same night that Yahweh brought the children of Israel out of the land of Mitzrayim according to their divisions. All right, Exodus 23. Starting in verse 14. Well, before we go there, so we see here that unleavened bread is about coming out of Mitzrayim, right? We're going to see a couple more. Verse 14, 3 times in the year you are to observe a festival to me. And if you'll notice, it says down there in the footnotes that the ISR, the festivals of Yahweh are grouped in 3 for 3 different times of the year. All right, so don't forget that. Verse 15, guard the festival of unleavened bread. 7 days you eat unleavened bread as I commanded you, as at the appointed time in the month of Abib, for in it you came out of Mitzrayim. And do not appear before me empty-handed. Verse 16, and the festival of the harvest, the first fruit of your labors which you have sown in the field, and the festival of the ingathering at the outgoing of the year, when you have gathered in the fruit of your labors 3 times in the year, all your males are to appear before the Master Yahweh. Okay, so we see that unleavened is about coming out of Mitzrayim, but what about these other 2? All right, because there's other 2 mentioned here. Leviticus, YHWH 23. We're going to be on page 130, because we're going to start reading in verse 39. Leviticus 23, verse 39. On the 15th day of the 7th month, when you gather in the fruit of the land, observe the festival of Yahweh for 7 days. On the first day is a rest, and on the 8th day a rest, and you shall take for yourselves on the first day the fruit of good trees, branches of palm trees, twigs and leafy trees, and willows of the stream, and rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim for 7 days. And you shall observe it as a festival to Yahweh for 7 days in the year, a law forever in your generations. Observe it in the 7th month. Dwell in booths for 7 days. All who are native Israelites dwell in booths, so that your generations know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of what? The land of Mitzrayim. I am Yahweh your Elohim. So we see here that the festival of booths is also about coming out of Mitzrayim. Maybe Yahweh wants us to be impressed with that. But check this. Deuteronomy 16, Devarim 16. Verse 1, page 202. Deuteronomy 16:1. Guard the month of Abib and perform the Passover to Yahweh your Elohim, for in the month of Abib Yahweh your Elohim brought you out of Mitzrayim by night. And you shall slaughter the Passover to Yahweh your Elohim from the flock and the herd in the place where Yahweh chooses to put His name. Eat no unleavened bread with it for 7 days. You eat unleavened bread with it, bread of affliction, because you came out of the land of Mitzrayim in haste, so that you remember the day in which you came out of the land of Mitzrayim all the days of your life. And no leaven should be seen with you in all your border for 7 days. Neither should any of the meat which you slaughter in the evening on the first day stay until morning. Stay all night until morning. You are not allowed to slaughter the Passover within any of your gates, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you, but at the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell, there you slaughter the Passover in the evening, at the going down of the sun, at the appointed time you came out of Mitzrayim. And you shall roast and eat it in the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses. And in the morning you shall turn and go to your tents. All right, 6 days you eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there is a closing festival to Yahweh your Elohim. You do no work. Count 7 weeks for yourselves. Begin the count of 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grain, and you shall perform, here's the second one, the festival of weeks to Yahweh your Elohim, according to the voluntary offering from your hand, which you give as Yahweh your Elohim blesses you. And you shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim, you and your son and your daughter, and your male servant and your female servant, and the Levite who is within your gates, and the stranger and the fatherless, and the widow who are in your midst, at the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell. And you shall remember that you were a slave in Mitzrayim, and you shall guard and do these laws. All right, do you see that the Feast of Weeks is also for us to remember coming out of Mitzrayim? Verse 13, perform the festival of booths for 7 days after the ingathering from your threshing floor and from the winepress, and you shall rejoice in your festival, you and your son and your daughter, this is a different festival, and your male servant and your female servant, and your Levite, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow who are within your gates. For 7 days you shall observe a festival to Yahweh your Elohim, in the place which Yahweh chooses, because Yahweh your Elohim does bless you in all the increase and in the work of your hands, and you shall be only rejoicing. 3 times in the year all your males appear before Yahweh your Elohim in the place which he chooses, at the festival of unleavened bread, and at the festival of weeks, and the festival of booths, and none should appear before me empty-handed, but each one with the gift of his hand, according to the blessing of Yahweh your Elohim, which he has given you. So we see in all actuality that all 3 of the pilgrimage feasts are to remind us about what Yahweh did when he brought Yisrael out of the land of Mitzrayim. All right? Leviticus 22. Leviticus 22, verse 31 is where we're going to get started. All right, let's see. You shall guard, verse 31, my commands and do them. I am Yahweh, and do not profane my set-apart name. And I shall set apart among the children of Israel. I shall be set apart among the children of Israel. I am Yahweh who sets you apart, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim to be your Elohim. I am Yahweh. Are we starting to realize that this is important to Yahweh? Yeah. Now, what I want to look at now is Ezekiel chapter 20, and we're going to read most of this chapter. Ezekiel chapter 20. We'll start reading in verse 1. And I'm going to tell you, as we read through this, there are things in here that we need to emulate, and there's things in here that we need to reject. And I think it'll become clear as we read through there. All right, verse 1. And it came to be in the 7th year, in the 5th month, on the 10th of the month, that certain of the elders of Israel came to inquire of Yahweh and sat before me. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, speak to the elders of Israel and say to them, Thus said the Master Yahweh, have you come to inquire of me? As I live, I am not being inquired of by you, declares the Master Yahweh. Judge them, son of man, judge them. Make known to them the abominations of their fathers. And you shall say to them, Thus said the Master Yahweh, On the day when I chose Yisrael and lifted my hand in an oath to the seed of the house of Jacob and made myself known to them in the land of Mitzrayim, I lifted my hand in an oath to them, saying, I am Yahweh your Elohim. And on that day I lifted my hand in an oath to bring them out of the land of Mitzrayim into a land that I had searched out for them, flowing with milk and honey, the splendor of all the land. And I said to them, Each one of you throw away the abominations which are before his eyes, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Mitzrayim. I am Yahweh your Elohim. But they rebelled against me. They would not obey me. All of them did not throw away the abominations which were before their eyes, nor did they forsake the idols of Mitzrayim. So I resolved to pour out my wrath on them to complete my displeasure against them in the midst of the land of Mitzrayim. And I acted for my name's sake, that it would not be profaned before the eyes of the Gentiles among whom they were, before whose eyes I had made myself known to them, to bring them out of the land of Mitzrayim. So I took them out of the land of Mitzrayim, and I brought them into the wilderness, and I gave them my laws, and showed them my right rulings, which if a man does, he shall what? Live by them. You know, it makes you think there's people that don't want to live. Verse 12, and I also gave them my Sabbaths. You notice that's plural? To be a sign between them and me, to know that I am Yahweh who sets them apart. But the house of Yisrael rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my laws. They rejected my right rulings, which if a man does, he shall live by them. And they greatly profaned my Sabbaths, when I said I would pour out my wrath on them in the wilderness to consume them. Now, do you realize that up to this part right here, he's telling the elders, you're not going to inquire of me. I'm Yahweh who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim. There we go again, out of the land of Mitzrayim, and all you have done is reject what I've done for you. All right? That's what's going on here. All right, verse 14. But I acted for my name's sake, not to profane it before the Gentiles, before whose eyes I had brought them out. And I myself also lifted my hand in an oath to them in the wilderness, not to bring them into the land which I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, the splendor of all lands, because they rejected my right rulings and did not walk in my laws, and they profaned my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols, and my eye pardoned them from destroying them, and I did not make an end to them in the wilderness. And I said to their children in the wilderness, Do not walk in the laws of your fathers, nor observe their right rulings, nor defile yourselves with their idols. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Walk in my laws and guard my right rulings and do them. And set apart my Sabbaths. And they shall be a sign between me and you to know that I am Yahweh your Elohim. But the children rebelled against me. They did not walk in my laws and my right rulings, and they did not guard to do them, which if a man does, he shall live by them. They profaned my Sabbaths. So I resolved to pour out my wrath on them to complete my displeasure against them in the wilderness. But I held back my hand and acted for my name's sake, not to profane it before the eyes of the Gentiles, before whose eyes I had brought them out. And I myself lifted my hand in an oath to those in the wilderness, to scatter them among the Gentiles and disperse them throughout the lands, because they had not done my right rulings, and they rejected my laws, and they profaned my Sabbaths. And their eyes were on their fathers' idols. And I also gave them up to laws that were not good, and right rulings by which they would not live. And I defiled them by their own gifts as they passed all their firstborn through the fire, so that I might stun them, so that they know that I am Yahweh. Therefore, Son of Man, speak to the house of Yisrael, and you shall say to them, Thus says the Master Yahweh. In this your fathers have further reviled me by committing trespass against me. When I brought them into the land for which I had lifted my hand in an oath to give them, and they saw all the high hills and all the thick trees. They offered their slaughterings there and provoked me with their offerings there. Then they set up their sweet fragrances there and poured out their drink offerings there. And I said to them, what is this high place to which you go? So its name is called High Place to this day. Therefore, say to the house of Israel, thus said the Master Yahweh, are you defiling yourselves in the way of your fathers, and do you whore after their abominations? For when you lift up your gifts and make your sons pass through the fire, you defile yourselves with all your idols, even to this day. And I shall be inquired of by you, O house of Israel. As I live, declares Yahweh, I'm not being inquired of by you. Makes you think sometimes we can do enough where Yahweh's not going to listen to our prayers. I mean, it's a bad place to be. And verse 32, and what comes up in the spirit, in your spirit, shall never be when you say, let us be like the Gentiles, like the tribes in the other lands, serving wood and stone. As I live, declares the Master Yahweh, do not I, with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm, and with wrath poured out, reign over you? And I shall bring you out from the peoples, and gather you out of the lands where you are scattered, with a mighty hand, and with an outstretched arm, and with wrath poured out. And I shall bring you into the wilderness of the peoples, and shall enter into judgment with you face to face there, as I entered into judgment with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Mitzrayim, so I shall enter into the judgment with you, declares the Master Yahweh. And I shall make you pass under the rod, and shall bring you into the bond of the covenant, and purge the rebels from among you, and those who transgress against me. From the land where you sojourn, I bring them out. But they shall not come into the land of Israel, and you shall know that I am Yahweh. As for you, O house of Israel, thus said the Master Yahweh, go serve each of you his idols. And afterwards, if you are not listening to me, but do not profane my set-apart name anymore with your gifts and your idols. For on my set-apart mountain, on the mountain height of Israel, declares the Master Yahweh, there all the house of Israel, all of them in the land, shall serve me. There I shall accept them, and there I shall require your offerings and your first fruits of your offerings, together with all your set-apart gifts. As a sweet fragrance, I shall accept you when I bring you out from the peoples, and I shall gather you out of the land where you have been scattered, and I shall be set apart in you and before the Gentiles, and you shall know that I am Yahweh when I bring you into the land of Israel, into which I lifted my hand in an oath to give to your fathers. And there you shall remember your ways and all your deeds with which you were defiled. And you shall loathe yourselves in your own sight because of all the evils that you did. And you shall know that I am Yahweh when I have dealt with you for my name's sake, not according to your evil ways, nor according to your corrupt deeds, O house of Israel, declares the Master Yahweh. All right, Yahweh will bring judgment on this earth again and on the house of Israel. All right, but do you realize that all of this happened because they forgot that He was the Elohim who brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of bondage, and they turned to their idols and from the idolatry of Mitzrayim. And you know, we need to think, what are we still embracing that we should have left in Mitzrayim? I mean, it's not a bad thing to do an inventory from time to time. Say, why am I doing what I'm doing? Am I doing it because it's in the Word, or is it because it's up here and in here and been pre-programmed? But He's going to bring the nations low. If the people won't repent, He'll bring this nation low too. He's no respecter of superpowers any more than He's a respecter of persons. And He's, and I look at this society and I see it getting worse. I don't see repentance. I see defiance. I see mocking. I see provoking. But I got to ask this question, how much of today's society do we embrace? And that's really something that we need to consider and think about, because we're just trading one Mitzrayim for another one. Amen? You know, what do we need to turn from to come out of Mitzrayim, right? In this house of bondage. You don't have to turn there. I'll just read it to you. James 4:4 says, adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with Elohim? All right? Whoever therefore intends to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of Elohim. All right? Yahweh brought Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, and He expects us to leave Mitzrayim in Mitzrayim. And anything else makes us an enemy of Yahweh. That just don't feel good. You know? While we prepare for unleavened to this next week, I would like to remind you that Yahshua likened leaven to false teachings. All right? In His day, when He talked to His taught ones about beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and that it was false teachings, He was trying to turn the people back to the law of Yahweh and to Moshe. Do you know that there's plenty of things in religious systems today that are teaching false teachings that nullify the commands of Elohim? Some of them are easy for us to see. Christmas trees, all that stuff. Bunny hop, those things there. But what do we need to get out? What do we need to get out? I'm sure there's something. All right. So, what's this feast about? This festival, what's this festival about? It's about coming out of the land of Mitzrayim, and that Yahweh meted out judgment on all the mighty ones of Mitzrayim and brought Israel out by a strong hand. Turn me to Deuteronomy chapter 6. It's going to be, I think this is going to be our last passage today. But we're going to read a good bit of it. Deuteronomy chapter 6, we're going to start reading verse 1, page 191. And this is the command, the laws and right rulings which Yahweh your Elohim has commanded to teach you to do in the land which you are passing over to possess, so that you fear Yahweh your Elohim, to guard His laws and His commands which I command you, so that your son and your grandson, you and your son and your grandson all the days of your life, and that your days be prolonged. And you shall hear, O Yisrael, and shall guard to do that it might be well with you, and that you increase greatly, as Yahweh your Elohim of your fathers has spoken to you in a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh our Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I'm commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And it shall be, when Yahweh your Elohim brings you into the land which He swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzhak, to Yaakov, to give you great and good cities which you did not build, and houses filled with all kinds of goods which you did not fill, and wells dug which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant, and you shall eat and be satisfied. Be on guard, lest you forget Yahweh, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, from the house of bondage. Fear Yahweh your Elohim and serve him and swear by his name, and do not go after other mighty ones, the mighty ones of the people who are all around you. For Yahweh your Elohim is a jealous El in your midst, lest the displeasure of Yahweh your Elohim burn against you, then he shall destroy you from the face of the earth. Do not try Yahweh your Elohim as you tried him in Massah. Diligently guard the commands of Yahweh your Elohim and his witnesses and his laws which he has commanded you, and you shall do what is right and good in the eyes of Yahweh, that it might be well with you. And you shall go in and possess the good land of which Yahweh swore to your fathers, to drive out all your enemies from before you, as Yahweh has spoken. When your son asks you in time to come, saying, what is the meaning of the witnesses and the laws and the right rulings which Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you? All right, did you see that? Then you shall say to your son, we were slaves of Pharaoh in Mitzrayim, and Yahweh brought us out of Mitzrayim with a strong hand, and Yahweh set signs and wonders great and grievous upon Mitzrayim, upon Pharaoh, and upon all his household before our eyes. And he brought us out from there to bring us in, to bring us the land which he swore to our fathers. And Yahweh commanded us to do all these laws, to fear Yahweh our Elohim for our good always, to keep us alive as it is today. And it is righteousness for us when we guard to do all this command before Yahweh our Elohim as he has commanded us. So let us not forget what this is all about as we prepare for this joyous festival, which reminds us that Yahweh is supreme, and what he did for Yisrael when he meted out judgment on all the mighty ones of the greatest superpower on earth. Because he is Yahweh who brought you out and delivered you out of the house of bondage and out of the land of Mitzrayim. Yevrakeka Yahweh ba'ishmareka, Ya'er Yahweh panavaleka bikuneka, Yasa Yahweh panavaleka biasem lakas shalom. Yahweh bless you and guard you. Yahweh make his face to shine upon you and shall favor you. Yahweh lift up his face upon you and give you his complete contentment.